تسويها full screen. اوكي طيب ما صارت full screen صح؟
No.
هي هذه الفول سكرين ولا لا هذه سلايد شو. طيب is it okay انه هيك تكون في وين بدي اسويها full screen؟
Doctor, at the bottom, the third button.
Yeah, this one, right? This is slideshow.
I think it makes it full screen.
Maybe this one. Maybe this one. لا. This one is different. Okay. Okay. Now it's good. Now it's good. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. طبعا, my name is Razan. I've been teaching this course for like 10 years maybe now. I'm so excited to start this course with you. I hope that the circumstances were better to see each other, but inshallah this COVID-19 will be over inshallah soon. طيب, before I start, do you have any question? Okay, so basically we are going to introduce you to nutrition, and you can hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. So basically we are going to be talking about first we are going to introduce nutrition to you. I'm sure this information is not that it's well-known information for you, but we're going to focus on the important nutrition introduction and general information, and then we are going to go deep into the certain diseases and how we are dealing with these diseases from nutritional point of view. What is it called? What is called medical nutrition therapy. So before we start with that, we have to know some basics about the nutrition. And my first lecture is about macronutrients. The macronutrients is usually the components of the food that we usually weigh in grams. They are relatively large amounts, and this can be the carbohydrates, the proteins, and the fat. So these macronutrients, we take extra care of these macronutrients because these also add to energy, because these are the food that our body uses for energy. So, and this, as I said, they fall into three main basic categories that are carbohydrates that have some subgroups underneath, and also the fat and lipids, and also the protein. And we're going to see all of this throughout the lecture, inshallah. طيب. To start with the carbohydrates first, we know that carbohydrates are the body's major, the most efficient source of energy, and they should comprise around 50% of our energy intake throughout the day. So the carbohydrates are easily used by the body for energy, of course, because they're readily available for the body for energy use. And the gram of carbohydrate provides us with 4 calories. So, for example, if you have something with 20 grams of carbohydrate, this will provide you with 80 calories as a total only from carbohydrates. Now, can carbohydrate be stored in the body? No, carbohydrates are stored only in small amount, but they're not stored for like unlimited storage like fat. So they can be stored as glycogen, and as you know, if you can tell me where we can store glycogen, as you all know, it's stored in the liver. So we can store carbohydrates in the liver, and also we can store carbohydrates in the muscles. But of course, the muscles are not the energy stores for the body. It's only the energy stores for their own energy source. So now if you think, as I said, like each 1 gram equals 4 calories. So if you have something that is 12 grams of carbohydrates per serving and 0 gram of fat and 0 gram of protein, so how much calories does this food have per serving? So it's basically you multiply the grams of carbohydrates by 4, and then you will get the amount of carbohydrate. It's the amount of calories, but it's not that simple. You should know that if there is any fiber that are not used as energy, also we minus the fiber, of course. Now, the carbohydrate structure is, we have it as simple sugar, we have it as monosaccharides and disaccharides, and we have it as complex sugar. So the simple sugar consists of monosaccharide, which is only one sugar molecule. And the example for this is hexoses. We have the glucose, fructose, and galactose. They are a bit similar. But they have different characteristics. Like, for example, the sucrose. I mean, the glucose, for example, is the blood sugar, which is the most common simple sugar, and we see it always in one of the 2 sugars in the disaccharides. So even the disaccharides, each, because they are 2 sugar molecules, so one of them is glucose and the other is a different other different simple sugar. And of course, glucose is also one of the polymers that make the polysaccharides or the complex sugar. So what does glucose do? It serves as an essential energy source for all the body's activity, as you all know. Brain, red blood cell are highly dependable on the regular, predictable supply of blood sugar, and the body adapted physiological mechanisms to maintain adequate blood sugar level. Now we have the fructose, which is the fruit sugar. It's the sweetest of all, and it has the same chemical formula of glucose, but it has different structure, and that makes it sweeter. So when you taste the fructose, you find it more sweet than the glucose, but that doesn't mean that it has more sugar in it, but it just tastes sweeter because of the structure. Of course, fructose, we see it a lot in the fruits and the fruit juices. We see it in honey and high fructose corn syrup, and we're going to speak about the high fructose corn syrup later. Now we have the third simple sugar, which is galactose. It's produced by the hydrolysis of breast milk, which is lactose, of course, and it's hydrolyzed into glucose and galactose. Okay, now we'll go back to the classification. We have also the simple sugars are the second part of the simple sugars are the disaccharides, which are the 2 sugar molecules. They are bonded together or attached together with a bond. And the sugars are sucrose, lactose, and maltose. So the disaccharides, the maltose, we'll start with the maltose. Maltose is made of 2 glucose molecules found naturally in grains and some fruits and produced when starch break down. So we can also have maltose made from the breaking down of the complex sugar. We have the sucrose. Sucrose is the table sugar, and we all use sucrose. We all have it in our houses. It's made of fructose and sucrose and glucose. And of course, it's made from refining sugarcane and sugar beets. Also, we have the lactose, which is the milk sugar, and it's made of galactose and glucose. Again, the rest of the classification is the complex sugars, which are only the polysaccharides that are glycogen, starch, and fiber. So as you can see here in the graph, the starch, it's somehow branched. It's a chain of glucose polymers, and it's somehow chained or branched, I mean, and the starch and the glycogen is much more branched, but the fiber is like a linear. Now, we'll talk also more about the complex or before talking about complex, let me tell you about high fructose corn syrup. From the name high fructose corn syrup, you might think that the high fructose corn syrup is only fructose. But actually it's not. It's half, I can't, I don't know why it's not showing. It's hanged. Okay, I'll stop sharing and see what are the problem. I don't know why it's hanged. Can you help me? No, it's not doing anything. I'm trying to change the slide. It's hanged. Okay. So, okay, what shall I do now? Shall I come out and try to enter again? Can you hear me? I can't even, I don't have actually a pointer. I think nobody's hearing me. Are you listening?
Doctor, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, but can you hear me?
Yes, we can. We're typing in the chat. Maybe you can.
Okay, because I have it at full screen, so I can't see anything in the chat. I don't know what's happening, so I'll try to go to come out of the conversation and come back, or the meeting.
Yes, please try to do that, Doctor.
Okay. So, okay, so I think this is the slide that we were talking about. The galactose is the lactose, which is the glucose and galactose, and then there is a question that always comes to people's mind, that what is the difference between sugar and glucose? Because some people think that sugar is the same as glucose. But you should know that glucose comes under the category of simple sugars, and sugars include monosaccharides and disaccharides. So when we say sugars, we're usually saying about simple sugars, which are the mono and di. Glucose is mono, while the sugar, the sugar that the table sugar that we use is the disaccharides. So some sugars like disaccharides consist of one glucose molecule plus any other monosaccharide, and glucose is the most abundant naturally occurring simple sugar among the other sugars. Now, also the second disaccharides is the maltose. We spoke about this, and also the sugar and lactose. Yes, now we left at the high fructose corn syrup. It's made from cornstarch, corn syrup. We know corn is starch, right? And starch is complex carbohydrate, so it's made mainly from glucose. So the glucose in the cornstarch is treated with enzymes to convert the glucose to the sweeter fructose. As I said before, that fructose has a sweeter taste than glucose. So they prefer to make it sweeter, to add it to the drinks and to all the syrups in commercial products. Now, high fructose corn syrup is a common sweetener in sodas and fruit flavored drinks. And if you carry any of the fruit or any sodas and you read on the ingredients, you will find that high fructose corn syrup is one of the ingredients. It's not mainly fructose, it still has glucose in it. So it consists of fructose and glucose mixed in a variety of concentration. But most commonly, the fructose is a bit higher. So that's why they say high fructose. So when it's 55% fructose and 45% glucose, they say it's high fructose corn syrup. So what is the problem with the high fructose corn syrup? It's the metabolism of fructose is different than the metabolism of other simple sugar. So when we metabolize fructose, it has an important health implications on our health, and also it can be metabolized by liver. It can only be metabolized by the liver in any significant amount. And the studies found that high fructose corn syrup or high fructose corn diet or high fructose diet in general may contribute to the development of obesity, type 2 diabetes, metabolic syndrome, high triglycerides, and hypertension. Now, we have also some genetic defects in carbohydrate metabolism that is linked to carbohydrate metabolism. So, for example, we have, I'm not going to, of course, to speak about all of them. I will just choose some just to give you an idea. So the hereditary fructose intolerance is a disorder happens when patient has more fructose than can be absorbed by the small intestine, or the capacity to absorb fructose is decreased. Therefore, the fructose will be more in the blood. So this is managed by careful dietary planning that avoids fructose from the food and also all the metabolic precursors. So fructose is replaced by the diet by glucose, maltose, or other sugars that don't have any fructose in them. Also, reading the food labels is very important. We teach the family and the child to read the food label to check the limited amount of the fructose. Keeping a food and symptoms diary can be helpful to identify the amounts and kinds of food that are tolerated, because some patients can tolerate small amounts of the fructose. And when they grow older, also they can tolerate more. Galactosemia is also another syndrome or case that can happen to babies or children. Galactose 1-phosphatase under uridyl transferase, which is GALT, and it has a lot of types. It's a GALT deficiency, so they are deficient from this particular enzyme, which is the most common cause of galactosemia and requires lifelong restrictions of dietary galactose. The clinical symptoms usually include failure to thrive, growth retardation, poor bone development, and the treatment, of course, may vary depending on the enzyme activity present, but the foods with the lactose or galactose are eliminated usually, or somehow restricted. Replace milk and milk products with soy-based products is also very important. And these patients usually have special formula that are given by the metabolic dietitian and by the doctor, and they are always following up to check their blood level and in case if they are having any toxicity. Glucose galactose intolerance is also an inherited metabolic disorder characterized by inability to transport and absorb glucose and galactose. So it manifests as severe diarrhea, hyperosmolar dehydration, and malnutrition. Infants should avoid the ingestion of glucose and galactose as well as sugars containing them. So this is on the contrary to inherited fructose intolerance. They can actually digest fructose-based formula better than do with the glucose. So they shouldn't have any formula that contain glucose or galactose. And as they get older, also the children can tolerate glucose and galactose better. So we spoke about the complex carbohydrates. The complex carbohydrates as carbohydrates are, as I mentioned, are glucose polymers. They are linked together to form polysaccharides. So we have two types. We have the glycogen, which is the animal form of carbohydrate storage, and it's the form of glucose stored in the body to allow, of course, rapid hydrolysis and making glucose available to the blood and to the cells. Starches, the plant's form of carbohydrate storage, we see it in all the plants. We see amylose and amylopectin. And from those also, we have a subgroup, which are the modified starch, the resistant starch, and the starch derivatives. So the starch, we will not talk about the glycogen because it usually doesn't come from food. So the starch is made of amylose and amylopectin. Amylose differs. It's somehow linear, and it's of course only glucose. All the starches are only glucose. Amylopectin is highly branched polymers of glucose. And depending on the plant, starch generally contain a mixture of amylose and amylopectin. So what is the modified starch? It undergoes one or more chemical or physical modifications which allow the starch to function properly under high or low heat for food processing. Because as you know, like we use starch in cooking, so to make it more like functioning and flexible with us in the cooking or in the manufacturing, it's better to be modified. So the starch we buy in the supermarket, it is modified starch. The resistant starch is starch that escapes digestion in the small intestines of healthy individuals because our gastrointestinal tract doesn't have the capability to digest the starch or some types of fibers. And these are called resistant starch. In other words, we can call resistant starch the fiber. So these are very important. The dietary fibers are very important for our health. Resistant starch, as you can see here in the graph, that the food, if they have starch, we can absorb it in the small intestine, but the resistant starch escape the absorption and escape the digestion. But it has very important role because the bacteria in like the normal flora we have in our large intestine ferment this little or resistant starch and produce something called prebiotic, which is called butyrate. It's a kind of short chain fatty acids that act as it protects our GI, as you can see here, like several health promoting properties have been described. It acts as a dietary fiber, so has positive effect on the health of the large intestine. Also, the resistant starch is completely degraded and fermented by the bacteria. And these bacteria, when they produce the high amount of butyrate, this may prevent the formation of intestinal cancer. The acidic medium also because it's butyric acid. So the acidic medium improves mineral absorption like iron and calcium from the large intestine. Resistant starch also can also easily be used by diabetic patients because they don't affect the blood glucose level. They are not digested, so they are not absorbed. Also, there are also indicators that resistant starch has a positive effect on blood cholesterol level because also they can lower the cholesterol level and may prevent the formation of gallstone. Now, polysaccharides, also the dietary fiber, we are saying more about the resistant starch and the dietary fibers, which are they are also similar. Non-starch polysaccharides, these are not digested. So all the fibers have a significant beneficial impact on human physiological functions in the GI tract. Including reducing the risk of certain diseases, such as cardiac diseases and cancers. Now, from the dietary fibers, we can classify them into two main parts. We have the soluble fibers. Solubles means that they can dissolve in water. They can form like a gel or viscous material. And example for this are gums and pectin found in apples and legumes and different types of legumes also, and oats, and also citrus fruits are high in soluble fibers. The soluble fibers are associated with protecting against heart disease and diabetes by lowering blood cholesterol and also lowering glucose levels. Now, the insoluble fibers are less soluble, so they don't usually dissolve in water. The examples are cellulose, hemicellulose, and lignin, and they are less readily fermented. They're found in the whole grains, the bran, as you can recall the bran or the wheat. It has a cover or a shell that is hard. So the bran is the outer layer of the wheat kernel. So this is called the insoluble fibers, and it's less soluble, but it promotes the bowel movement and alleviate constipation. So the examples are also cereals. Also, apples can be a good example, and especially the outer layer or the skin. Avocados, whole wheat bread, because they have also the bran. We have also something called functional fibers, and these fibers are isolated or extracted from plants and made as fiber supplements. You can find them also in pharmacies in the form of tablets, oils, powders, or capsules. And these are very good prescription for patients who are suffering from constipation. Now, what are the health effects of starch and fibers? Well, let's revise. First of all, high carbohydrate diet rich in whole grains can protect against heart disease and stroke. Also can protect or can play a key role in reducing the risk of type 2 diabetes, enhances the health of large intestines, protects against colon cancer, helps to maintain healthy body weight. And despite fiber benefits to health, they also have drawbacks. How they have drawbacks? Because they are undigested, so they are fermented in the large intestine, and they can produce gases and bloating. So the gas production is byproduct of the fermentation, and large amount of gas can result in gastrointestinal discomfort and flatulence in some individuals. Now, what are the recommended intakes of fibers? We have the Food Drug Association, FDA, recommends the intake of 25 grams of fibers a day. This is the average. Or the minimum, maybe we can say. The American Dietetic Association recommends between 20 to 35 of dietary fibers, but the worldwide or the World Health Organization recommends an upper limit of 40 grams of dietary fiber a day. So it's probably not recommended to exceed this limit because of the drawbacks and the side effects of the high fiber intake. Now, this is the example of high fiber food. We have lots of fiber found in our food, like vegetables, fruits mainly, and for seeds and legumes. So you can always look for references online and know how much fiber you are consuming. The best sources of healthy resistant starch, also the resistant starch, as I said, also it escapes the digestion. So it's very important also to know from where we can have resistant starch, like for example, the raw bananas, the sweet potatoes, the lentils, all the legumes, beans, all can be high in resistant starch. Now, what are the recommendations for carbohydrates? As I mentioned earlier, about 50% or more than 50% should come from carbohydrates, your calories intake, I mean. So the dietary recommended intake 2020 to 2025 dietary guidelines for carbohydrate is not changed actually from the previous one. Or previous ones, between 45 to 65%. Of course, it depends on the level of activity, the age, the gender, and so on. So average, it's 55% of total daily calories. Most carbohydrates should come from nutrient-dense foods, such as beans, whole grains, fruits, and vegetables. They are very important and very good sources of carbohydrates and healthy carbohydrates. On the contrary, we should limit the refined carbohydrates and added sugars. So we shouldn't rely on these for our sources of carbohydrates because unfortunately, when we do like surveillance, we find that humans consume half of their sugar from natural sources of milk, fruits, vegetables, and grains, but the other half consists of refined and added sugars that come from soft drinks, table sugar, baked goods, fruit drinks, ice creams, chocolates, candies, and breakfast cereals. They are all loaded with sugars. So it's always better to restrict and limit these sources as much as you can, and focus on the first part much more. Now, limiting added sugar to less than 10% of calories per day for age 2 and older, and to avoid added sugars for infants and toddlers is very important because this sugars can be also harmful for children and for adults. It can add up to the calories and up to the sugar that they are consuming. So too much sugar isn't so sweet for health because they can contribute to nutrient deficiencies, especially for growing children and adolescents. They have limited appetite and limited stomach size. So when they are given the sweets, they will not be able to eat the healthy food they should eat. Also, they are at risk of dental caries, raising the risk of weight gain and type 2 diabetes, especially for young children and adults. So the American Heart Association issued new recommendation for added sugar, not to exceed 9 teaspoons or equals to 36 grams of sugar per day. That equals 150 calories for men and less, of course, for women. So what are the alternatives to sugar? We have the artificial sweeteners, the non-nutritive sweeteners. Why we call it non-nutritive? Because they don't really add to the energy consumption. So when you take or when you consume the artificial sweetener, you will have 0 calories. The FDA approved the use of several artificial sweeteners such as saccharin, aspartame, a lot of types now available in the market: sucralose, neotame, highly refined stevia. Some of them are not yet approved, and some of them, as you may know, the aspartame contains phenyl. For the patients who are having phenyl urea, they should not, because they have phenylalanine, so they should not consume it. Also for pregnant and lactating, it's not really advised. I usually advise my patients to start weaning themselves from sugars. Like, for example, if they are used to adding 2 teaspoons of sugar to their tea, starts to make it 1, and slowly wean it to half, and then 1/4, and then they will, slowly their tongue will be used to the less sugar taste, and then they will not add anything. It's much better than using the artificial sweeteners, especially that when you are taking something that has the sweet taste, you will not actually train your brain to know or to have something that is not sweet. You are always telling your brain that sweet is good. Now, sugar replacers is something different than the artificial sweeteners, because they can provide some energy, like sugar alcohols, mainly used in chewing gums. Especially examples are all the names are ending with all. So like maltitol, mannitol, or sorbitol. So these are, they can provide energy than sugar, but less energy, called nutritive sweeteners. Absorption is slower than regular sugar, thus they evoke low glycemic response. So they are used in some of the diet products or diet drinks, and also chewing gums, because the enzymes in the mouth or the bacteria in the mouth cannot metabolize as rapidly as sugar, so they don't contribute to dental caries. The side effects of these sugar replacers is the gas forming because of the indigestion, and they have like high osmolality, so they can draw some fluids, and also they can cause abdominal discomfort. Now we are done with the carbohydrate. Any question, or shall I continue? Would you like to have a break to pray, or you prayed already? I guess no one is listening to me.
Yes, we're here, doctor.
Okay. Would you like to take a break for prayer, or you'd like to finish? Okay, I'll try to make it fast. Okay.
Doctor, the students would like to finish, and then we can take a break.
Yes, I understand. Okay. So now the fats and lipids, it's very, very simple. I'll just go through the slides very, very quickly, and just stop where it's very important. I will explain about the fat. Fat, we know that it's constitute approximately 30% of the total calories we consume. So the 1 gram of fat equals or provides 9 calories. And fat, opposite of carbohydrate, it can be stored in large amounts in the body as adipose tissue. We have triglycerides, we have phospholipids and sterols. These are the classification of fats and lipids. We'll start with the triglycerides because they make up to like 95% of the lipids in our body and also in the food. So every triglyceride contains 1 molecule of glycerol, which is this one, the glycerol, and then it's attached to 3 different fatty acids. So it's not necessary that the fatty acid should be the same. So they have like different fatty acid 1, fatty acid 2, and fatty acid 3. And this what makes the fat or differentiate or distinguish the fat. So the type of fatty acids are joined with the glycerol or with the ester linkage. Most triglycerides contain mixture of more than 1 type of fatty acids, and they contain, I can't see it here. Okay, so are unbranched. So what you should know also that fatty acids are usually linear. They are unbranched chain of carbohydrate carbon atoms, and they are classified to the number of number of carbons in the chain itself. So the length of fatty acids makes it like short chain, medium chain, long chains. And also we can classify them according to the number of double bonds. What is the degree of unsaturation, because the double bonds means they are unsaturated. So this is also another classification. And the third classification is the position of the double bond in the chain. So as you can see here, this is a saturated fatty acids. That means all the carbon atoms are saturated with hydrogen, while the unsaturated fatty acids, excuse me, some of the carbon atoms are actually not fully saturated, and they can be saturated because they have here double bonds, so they can be saturated with hydrogen, or they can be hydrogenated. Now we have like 3 or 4 main fatty acids that are very important to nutrition. First of all, the stearic acid, which is the saturated, and mostly it is found in animal fat. We have the oleic acid, which is the monounsaturated acid. It's found in olive oil and canola oil. And we have the linoleic acid, which is the polyunsaturated. When we say poly, means that it has more than one double bond. So when it's 2 double bonds or more, we call it polyunsaturated. And we can find it in other vegetable oils like sunflower, safflower, and soybean oil. And we have the linolenic acid, which is also unsaturated, but it has 3 double bonds, and it's found in soybean, flax seeds, and walnuts. So now let's take each one on itself. The degree of unsaturation influences the firmness of fat at room temperature. So when it's polyunsaturated vegetable oil, they are usually liquids at room temperature. The more saturated animal fat, the more they are solids. Now, what does this mean? It influences the stability of the fat, because when the polyunsaturated fat means they are unsaturated, and they are prone to hydrogenation, and they are prone to oxidation. So the unsaturated fats spoil more readily because their double bonds are unstable, while the monounsaturated fat are slightly less because they have one double bond only. When the fat spoils, it's called rancidity. So what is rancidity? Rancidity is having a strong and unpleasant smell or taste from no longer being fresh. And this happens to oils, and also anything that contains oils, like المكسرات, like nuts. Sometimes we smell the nuts and seeds, and we find like an unpleasant smell, and also they taste differently. So the oils can be especially susceptible to rancidity because their chemistry can make them exceptionally susceptible to oxygen damage, and this is called oxidative rancidity. So during this process, the oxygen molecules interact with the structure of the oil, and it damages actually the natural structure of the oil in a way that can damage, or that can change the odor, the taste, and the safety for consumption. Which means when it's not stored well, like the nuts and the seeds and the oils, it's better to be discarded and not to be used because it can be harmful. Now, the other classification is the location of double bond in the chain. The position of double bond nearest to methyl group and is described by omega number. So omega-3 and omega-6 are very important in health, because omega-3 fatty acids, in which the first double bond, we call it PUFA, which means polyunsaturated fatty acid. The first double bond is 3 carbons away from the methyl end. And the example is the linolenic acid, which is the alpha linolenic acid. The omega-6 fatty acid is also a polyunsaturated fatty acid in which the first double bond is 6 carbon from the methyl group, and the example is linoleic acid. Now, this is the methyl group here. This is the methyl end. So the first carbon, this is the first carbon, the second, and the third. So that's why it's called omega-3. Here it is omega-3, although it has a lot of double bonds, but it doesn't necessarily. The first double bond that matters. Here the first double bond is the 6, so that's why we call it the omega-6. Now, what are the essential fatty acids? As you, probably heard that omega-3, omega-6, essential fatty acids. What do we mean by essential? Essential means that our body cannot synthesize these fatty acids. So we have to take them from food. So omega-3 fatty acids and omega-6 fatty acids cannot be synthesized, and they have very important roles in our body. So if we don't consume them from food, we will be deficient. Humans can form other clinically significant fatty acids such as icosapentaenoic acid, which is the EPA, and docosahexaenoic acid, which is the DHA from ALA. So like these two very important also derivatives from the omega-3 fatty acids are also essential fatty acids, but they are made from the essentially fatty acid, the omega-3. And they are very important for the growth, development of the eyes, brain, may also have a role in prevention and treatment of heart disease. Also, we have the arachidonic acid, which is the made also from linoleic acid. Now, the roles of essential fatty acids, usually deficiencies are unlikely because most foods have them, and serve as structural parts of cell membranes. They are precursors of other longer fatty acids, as we saw that now, like the EPA and the DXA, they are part of the eicosanoids. And eicosanoids are members of the lipid families. They are powerful compounds. They act as localized hormones and also have multiple local functions such as prostaglandins, thromboxanes, and leukotrienes. So the eicosanoids participate in the regulation of blood pressure. Also, they alter the activity of platelets and contribute to blood clotting. Also, the immune response to injury and infection modify the process of inflammation, and thus they have beneficial effect on the number of disease states, such as the cardiovascular diseases, arthritis, inflammatory conditions, and brain functions. So what are the sources? The main sources of essential fatty acids for the omega-3, they are mostly found in marine sources like fish and seafood. Also, they are found in flax seeds, اللي هو بذور الكتان, and olive oil. Now, for the omega-6 fatty acids, they are found in vegetable oils and meats. And just let me move to another room. Oh no, don't say that. Don't do this to me again. Oh my God. Do you know how to make command escape delete or control alt delete? How can I make it in a Mac, in a MacBook?
Doctor, do you need help in anything?
Now we're talking about the location and essential fatty acids. We spoke about the eicosanoids, how they are very important, and the sources. They are usually marine sources for the omega-3 and omega-6 found in vegetable oils and meats. Now, the dietary intake of omega-6 and omega-3 fatty acids should be balanced. What do we mean by balanced? The ratio, there is still a debate between the ratio of omega-6 and omega-3. Although omega-3 is very important to our health more than omega-6, and it has a lot of health benefits. However, the amount of omega-6 is still high. Modern Western diets exhibit omega-6 to omega-3 ratios ranging between 15 to 1 to 17 to 1. But humans should consume more omega-3 fatty acids from vegetables such as flax seeds and marine sources, especially fatty acids. We're going to see here how the, here, let me show you. If you can see here, this graph will show you the amount or different types of oils. Oils like safflower oil has the least amount of saturated fat, while has the most amount of monounsaturated fat, which is very high in omega-3. Also, like for example, let's see here, salmon fat. Salmon also has more of omega-3. Thus, I said the marine sources are very important also for the sources of omega-3. Also, the flax seeds, which flax seeds are the bidur al-kittan, they are the highest in omega-3 also. So omega-3 and omega-6 are two types of polyunsaturated. They are both required for the body. Anyway, we're not saying that we shouldn't take omega-6, but the ratio is very important. The too much omega-6 and too little omega-3 are among the causes for many diseases in modern society, because the omega-6 fatty acids tend to be oversupplied, while omega-3 are undersupplied in modern Western diet due to industrialized food oil production. So this overwhelming intake of omega-6 leads to hyperimmune responses and interferes with the proper function of omega-3 fatty acids, causing detrimental effects associated with chronic cardiovascular diseases and inflammatory responses. Because as you can see here, the cardiovascular diseases increases, the risk factors increase with the higher omega-6 diet, and it's lowered when we have a high omega-3 diet. Also, the inflammatory responses, because the omega-3 will lower the inflammation response, or the number of interleukin and CRP, C-reactive protein, while they increase with the omega-6. The thrombosis increases with omega-6, while it can lower the atherosclerotic plaque, also increases with omega-6 and decreases with omega-3. So epidemiology and dietary intervention studies have concluded that while an exceptionally high omega-6 to omega-3 ratio promotes the development of many chronic diseases, and reduced omega-6 to omega-3 ratio can prevent or reverse these conditions or these diseases. For example, we have like a ratio of 4 to 1 in some studies, this was associated with 70% reduction in mortality in secondary coronary heart disease prevention. So imagine if you are like eating a ratio of 4:1 on the, if you are comparing that to the Western diet, which is the 17:1 or 15:1, omega-6 to omega-3. Also, a ratio of 2.5:1 reduced rectal cell proliferation in patients with colorectal cancer. The lower omega-6 to omega-3 ratio in women was associated also with decreased risk of breast cancer. And the ratio of 2:1 or 3:1 suppressed the inflammation in patients with rheumatoid arthritis. And also a ratio of 5:1 had beneficial effects on patients with asthma. So wherever the ratio is 10:1, they start to have adverse consequences. So it's better always to be below 10:1. Now, what do we mean by hydrogenation? Remember when I told you that unsaturated fatty acids are having double bond? That means the carbon atoms are not fully saturated with hydrogen, and they can also accept more hydrogen to bond with them. So the addition of hydrogen atoms to liquid oils to form a stable solid fat such as margarine, this is called hydrogenation. But the hydrogenation, although it prolongs shelf life, but it alters the texture of food by making liquid oil more solid. And also during hydrogenation, what happens is the structure of the fat differs. So as you can see here, it's the normal structure is cis 2-butene, which is the hydrogen atoms or on the same side of the carbon atoms, while the after hydrogenation, some unsaturated fatty acids will become switched. So this is called trans fatty acids. I'm sure you've heard about trans fatty acids in the news that are harmful to our health. So it's found in chemically hydrogenated margarines, commercial frying fats, baked goods, salty snacks. And these unfortunately have negative effects on human health. And all the food that we consume, we should read the label if they contain any trans fat, because sometimes they do. Although it's being now banned by the kingdom or by our Ministry of Health to have any food that has trans fatty acids, and also it's been banned for a long time in the States. Because it's associated with the increased risk of coronary heart disease, cancer, and other chronic diseases, including diabetes. Now, what are the roles of triglycerides in the body? We know that fat provide an energy reserve, insulation and cushioning to the organs, also help the body use the carbohydrate and protein efficiently, because we are relying on reserve energy. Instead of using protein, for example, as a source of energy. Also, high consumption of energy and sugars, especially alcohol. We should know that it's always associated with high blood triglycerides level, because when we consume sugars and we're not using these sugars, we are turning the excess sugars in our body to triglycerides. Therefore, when we eat a lot of sugars, we have fatty liver and high triglycerides level. High triglyceride level are associated with high risk of heart disease and maybe a sign of metabolic syndrome. Now, the second and the third parts of fats and lipids, very short. Phospholipid is the second one. Phospholipid is also a compound similar to triglyceride, but it has a phosphate group and choline in place of one of the fatty acids. So instead of 3 fatty acids, we have the choline. And there are some important roles of phospholipids in our body, because it constitute the cell membrane, allow the soluble substance move back and forth across the cell membranes into a watery fluids on both sides, and also act as an emulsifier in our body to help also digest and metabolize the fat. The most famous and known emulsifier is the lecithin. Lecithin is a major phospholipid, and it's a major component of our lipid bilayer in the cell membrane. It's also part in the lipoproteins in our blood, the very low density lipoproteins, LDL, HDL, which are used to transport fats and cholesterol. The lecithin also can be made by the body, and it can be found in animal products. For example, liver and egg yolks are very high in lecithin. Plant sources of lecithin are soybean, peanuts, legumes, and spinach. Now, for the sterols, are the plant sterols and steroids are like the plant sterols found in both plant and animal food, but we are mainly focusing on the plant. Cholesterol is the most famous steroid, and it's the basic for all the steroid derivatives made in our body, like glucocorticoids, like the cortisone, the mineralocorticoids, the androgens, the estrogens, bile acids, vitamin D, hormone, are all made of cholesterol. So cholesterol belongs to the sterols family or steroids family. Cholesterol, only animal protein or animal sources contain significant amount of cholesterol. We see cholesterol is high in all the animal products like meats, eggs, fish, poultry, and dairy products, especially if it's like full fat. Cholesterol is found also in all cell membranes. Humans synthesize cholesterol in the liver. And high LDL cholesterol is associated with high risk of heart disease and heart attack. But high HDL cholesterol have a protective effect on heart and vessels. So when we eat cholesterol by itself, it doesn't contribute to caloric intake, but usually cholesterol doesn't exist alone. It exists with other fats. So therefore we can calculate the fat as is. Now, the synthetic lipids, we have something called fat replacers, and these synthetic lipids are used in some of the products, the fat-free products used commercially. They imitate the texture, they have other sensation, or they imitate the other sensation of fat, especially in the mouth, but they don't provide any absorbable nutrients. They pass through the GI tract undigested. They might provide some calories, like 0 to 5 calories per gram, comparing to the 9 grams of calories to 9 calories to 1 gram of fat. Also, the very important commercially product is the Olestra. Usually it's made in the and as I said, like fat-free cheese and all the fat-free products. Now we have also another synthetic lipid, which is called the medium chain triglycerides. They are formed commercially, and they contain 6 to 12 carbon atoms. These are very important in our practice, because we use them as a source of energy for patients who cannot tolerate the fat. So it's called MCT oil. We give them, like, we want to give extra calories, or we want to give a replacement of fat to patients who have diseases that they cannot metabolize fat. So we can always use the MCT oil. They can also naturally occur in coconut oil. So as I said, it increases the energy expenditure and may result in faster satiety and facilitate weight control. MCT is used as a fat source with patients with chylothorax, also after the cardiac surgeries or any surgeries that arises when lymphatic fluids or the chyles accumulate in the pleural cavity. Because of the leakage from the lymphatic vessels, we usually recommend to use only MCT oil, because these patients should go on a fat-free diet. So this is most commonly seen after thoracic surgery and congenital heart disease surgeries. So what are the recommendations for lipid intake? The dietary recommended intake is between 20 to 35%. So the average of 30% of fat from our total energy intake only, and less than 10% should come from saturated fatty acids, not more than that. Most fat should come from mono and polyunsaturated fatty acids, and the trans fatty acids should be kept as low as possible or should be restricted. Limiting the invisible fat that marble the meat or are hidden in cheese, chocolate, baked goods, donuts, cookies, and cakes are always recommended. Now, for the health effects of fat, we know that both the amount and types of fat in the diet influence people's risk for disease. So when you take when your food is high in saturated fat, this will raise your low density lipoprotein cholesterol. And when the LDL cholesterol is high, usually the risk for heart disease is high. And when you take high intake of trans fatty acids, this will also elevate your LDL level and lowers your HDL cholesterol. So the food cholesterol doesn't really raise blood cholesterol as dramatically as saturated fat does, and also as trans fatty acid does. And this is also another graph for your information to know about the different and the best and the worst fat in our food. Now we'll move to the third part of the macronutrients, which is the protein. Protein mainly made of amino acids. Protein is made up to of about 20 different amino acids attached together by peptide bond. And amino acids have the same basic structure as carbohydrates and lipids, plus they have the amino group. And this amino group, differentiate the different amino acids. It's similar to carbohydrates in terms of calories providing, 4 calories per 1 gram. And this is how it looks. So as you can see here, the amino group is the thing that differentiates the protein from other macronutrient. Now, how can we classify the amino acids? We can classify them according to the essential and non-essential and conditionally essential. Why we say essential? Essential means that if we don't have these amino acids from food, our body will not have them unless it degrades the muscles and obtain these essential amino acids. And the non-essential, of course, the body can synthesize these amino acids, and conditionally they are needed in times of illness and stress or pregnancy. So these are the list of essential amino acids. These are 9 essential amino acids, and these are more than 9 non-essential amino acids. Now, the roles of proteins, proteins serve as building materials for a lot of products in our body. So lastly, they are used for energy. First of all, like for growth and maintenance, I'll give you examples like collagen to build the muscles, blood, skin, etc. Enzymes also, we have like all the digestive enzymes and other enzymes are made of protein. They are made to facilitate chemical reactions without being changed in the process like catalysts. Also hormones that some or many proteins act as hormones regulating variety of actions such as insulin. Also protein are regulators of fluid balance. So our body indeed is in need of proteins. We have like albumin is the most important protein in our body, and it's produced in our body. Acid-base regulators because they help to maintain the balance between the acids and bases. And this is within the body's fluid by acting as buffers. So these are also proteins, very important. Transporters, some proteins transport substances such as lipids, vitamins, minerals, such as hemoglobins. Antibodies also, some proteins inactivate foreign invaders, or thus protecting the body against diseases like immunoglobulins. And lastly, it's a source of energy and glucose. So proteins provide some fuel, of course, but our body can use it as a source of energy, and also that can make gluconeogenesis from protein, but it's better not to, because as you saw like earlier, it has a lot of precious roles in our body. Now, what do we mean by nitrogen balance? Protein supplies nitrogen in the form of amino acid according to the formula. If you want to know how much nitrogen, you just divide by 6.25. The gram of protein, you divide it by 6.25. You know how grams of protein, nitrogen. Don't worry about it. You will not need to memorize this formula. In healthy adults, protein synthesis balances with degradation usually. The protein intake from food will balance with the nitrogen excretion in the urine, feces, and sweat. So usually when we are healthy, we are in zero nitrogen balance. This means that the nitrogen that we are receiving from food equals the nitrogen output. But when we are in negative nitrogen balance, this is usually during infection, trauma, starvation. So this means that we are excreting more nitrogen that it's ingested. And when we are in positive nitrogen balance, this is usually happen in the pregnant woman and her growing child, when we are ingesting protein for growth and retaining more protein than it's lost. So protein in foods, of course, protein is not equal in the food. We have like high quality protein, and we have complementary protein. So if we want to obtain the 9 essential amino acids from the food, we have to concentrate on high quality protein, which is called complete protein. And this is the dietary proteins that contains all the essential amino acids in relatively same amounts that human requires. Example are the animal protein. So all animal proteins have the same amount of 9 essential amino acids needed in our body for building. So this is the quality of protein, and it's also measured by its digestibility, because sometimes the protein is not readily available to our body. Like when we digest it, it might not be digestible as efficiently. And also it can be measured by the ability to support growth. And this is what we mean by quality of protein. Now, the complementary protein is 2 or more dietary proteins whose amino acid assortment complement each other. Like, for example, for those who are vegan or vegetarians who are not consuming meat or eggs, so these people can always complement. They can mix and match by like eating rice or grains and also legumes, because legumes are usually high in protein and they are closer to meat by the content of essential amino acids. So by mixing, they are obtaining the 9 essential amino acids, which is called complementary protein. Now, the recommended intakes of protein, the RDA is 0.8 grams per kg per day. This is for the healthy weight. When you are like underweight, maybe you need more. And when you are overweight, you just need to calculate your ideal body weight or the adjusted body weight. And according to that, you can start calculating your protein requirements. Usually 10 to 35% of energy intake. So if you noticed here that we recommend always the percentage from the energy, from the total energy intake for the carbohydrate and fat, while for the protein, because it's very important and the need for protein is very high to keep our homeostasis. So it's better to always count it as gram per kg, because we need to make sure that we are receiving the needed amount of protein. Now, it's found in a wide variety of animal and plant food. And of course, as I mentioned, animal-based protein food includes seafood, meat, all meats, like including poultry and fish, also the eggs and milk products, like yogurt and cheese. Plant sources of protein include beans and peas. Nuts, seeds, and soy proteins are also, or soy products are also very high in protein. Now, what are the health effects of protein? Of course, we know that the overconsumption of protein offers no benefits and may pose health risk. And we know that always animal protein are rich in saturated fat. So for those who like to consume a lot of protein from animal protein, they are at risk of consuming a lot of saturated fat, and they are at risk of elevated levels of amino acid homocysteine. However, amino acid arginine is also known to protect against heart disease and lower homocysteine level. Now, also the cancer is increased with the high intake of meat, because population studies suggest a correlation between high intake of animal protein and some types of cancer like colon, breast, kidneys, pancreas, and prostate cancers are all linked to high intake of animal protein. Also osteoporosis, because when protein intake is high, usually calcium excretion increases. For the weight control, it's always better to rely on the plant-rich protein, because the protein-rich food are often fat-rich food when they are consumed from animal sources, so they can contribute to weight gain. The kidney diseases, of course, when the patient or the person is susceptible to kidney disease, like they have some impairment, kidney function, this, of course, restricting the protein may help to slow the progression of kidney disease and limit the formation of kidney stones. Now, this is just the end of the lecture. We are going to just go through the basic food groups, because as you may know that all foods offer valuable nutrients, and people should make selection from each food daily. So in order for you to know that you are having always a complete diet or a complete balanced diet, you need to take from all the food groups. We have like 6 food groups, main food groups. The grains, of course, grains contain all the wheat, like bread and pasta and rice and bagels and cereals, oatmeals and popcorn. So these belong to the grains family. Now the fruits, of course, all the fruits, including also the fruit juice, and including also the frozen fruits or canned fruits. Vegetables, like all the fresh and frozen vegetables and canned vegetables. Milk and milk products, also like whether it's fat-free or low-fat or fat or whole-fat or whole milk products, or frozen yogurt or yogurt. So all also belong to the milk and milk products. Now, meat and poultry and fish, these are also all the animal products that are rich in complete protein, but also rich in fat. Nuts, seeds, and legumes are also rich in fat, but they are less harmful, because the type of fat is beneficial. Now, notice here is that some classification combine the meat and the bean with one group, thus making the groups only 5. So this is my pyramid. We have this is the newest new my pyramid. They also put it as longitudinal instead of putting it horizontal, and they also divided the groups according to the amount needed. So you need like grains, you need vegetables, you need fruits a lot, but also you need a little bit of oil and milk and meat. Excuse me. And as you notice here, they added the stairs to show you that you should be physically active for at least 30 minutes a day, up to 60 minutes also. And if you want to to do like to prevent any weight gain or sustain weight loss, you need to even increase your level of physical activity. And here they specify the grains that should be at least half of it should come from whole grains, to make sure that you are receiving a good amount of fiber. Also, the variety in the vegetables and fruits will ensure that you are taking from all the different vitamins and minerals. And here also, most fat should be from fish, nuts, and vegetable oil, and you should limit the solid fat and limit the margarine and butter. The milk you should focus more on low fat or fat-free dairy products. The meat and beans, you should eat lean cuts and focus on seafood more and beans and avoid frying. So this is a new and very helpful guide for everyone who needs to know how he follows the balanced diet. And here is also the same, but it's maybe it's more explained. Also here we can see that another recommendation, it's more easier for the layman to understand. Instead of my pyramid, they did this, they call it my plate. So they divided the plate into 4 parts, and they focused more on the half of the plate should come from vegetables and fruits, which are relatively less in calories, and only should have 1/4 as a portion of protein and the 1/4 as a portion of grain, and the dairy also on the side. But also the School of Public Health, the Harvard School of Public Health, published something called Healthy Eating Plate, which is a modified version of the My Plate. And they focused more on on explaining the portions should come from healthy, limited fat, limited red meat, and also here they say maybe it's not very important to drink dairy and milk all the time. It's maybe you can drink water or low calorie drinks, but you can have only 1 to 2 servings or dairy, according of course to the age and to the need. Here they added the healthy oil. Here they added stay active. So if you want to compare to this is very general, but this is more in details, and this is the one that you should really adapt and follow. So we are done. Alhamdulillah, we finished before 5. And hopefully everything was clear to you. If you need anything, if you want to send me my email, I think I shared with you. And if you have any question, don't hesitate. Is there any question now, or I can leave?
Guys, feel free to unmute yourself and ask questions.
Okay, I guess there is no question. I hope that this and basic, it's very basic.